Yeah, I want to talk more about this whole idea of like what does it mean to be white, and like whether or not white safe spaces are valid, like what makes how come people are able to you know eh, be a part of uh all black everything that don't look black, but people that you need to look white to be um in all white everything. Interesting. The arena is a section inside of my Discord server. Oh my god, why am I illiterate? Hold on. There you go. So, basically, this part of my server, it's just, I only people that are like verified with me can come in. So basically, like I could just kind of tell based on like how are you acting in chat, and then based off of how you're acting in chat, I'll be like, okay, it seems like we can hang out. And then if you're not being good in chat, then we could talk further about that. Hold on. Also, hold on. Yeah, anybody can join. I'm just answering Dylan on something. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna be hanging out in the arena. If you don't have permission to be in the arena, just join another channel. And then I'll move you into the arena after. Hello.
That panel was as boring as I thought it was, and knew that everyone was getting overhyped over nothing.
Yeah, so I think part of the whole thing is that Prime wanted to get more right wingers on, but all of them like said, okay, no. I like they backed out. So part of it was I think he didn't want to get mostly lefties because he knew it would become basically a proper conversation with like nuance and all. He's like, no, I want blood. I'm here for the money, okay? Um, so yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it ended up being what it
Should
was.
just
But
you know
at
need
the
to
end
do
of
just
the
make a
day,
race panel. Just be like, let's just talk about race, and just have like one person from each like from every ethnicity you can find on the
yeah.
panel.
Oh,
Just let them go at it.
confined. Now that's a good idea.
I said can find.
Oh, okay. I thought you were just gonna like,
Confine them all.
yeah, you
Make them
can't
fight to the
leave.
death.
Yeah, I'm
Just
like,
give them the
okay.
chair.
Yeah, I was
This is
confused.
no
I'm like,
longer a panel. This is Mortal Kombat.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, I can do that for you, but like,
It's a panel. Just one from every ethnicity, and just ask really charged questions.
yeah, like, when was the first time somebody called you a slur? Like those types of really fun questions.
No, like who
Oh,
is the most privileged on this panel?
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
see,
just.
I'm good at it.
By the way, Alfin, I see that you keep on popping in and out of the arena. Are you having like audio issues? We'll see. Okay.
Sounds like a yes.
Yeah, it sounds like a definitively.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
You said
Yeah, there's
yeah.
a bit of
So
audio issue. Okay, well that's fine. Um, yeah. So, well, first of all, somebody told me to fix my posture, and I forgot to do that. So let me do that really quickly.
How dare you slouch on
I
camera?
know. What the fuck?
dude, I literally
Literally
hold on.
awful
This
woman.
is literally how I look right now. This is how I look on stream too. I'm literally like as far back as possible.
Let's
I might
see.
fall out of my chair.
So I don't know.
Uh,
Oh,
This is how I
yeah.
stream too.
That's yeah. This is a straight chillin' position. Okay.
and I'm just
So
like, when you
so
make the bed, that's
so I am wondering, like, what do you guys like? What makes somebody like? What does it mean to be white? Like, why? Why is it okay? Does anybody here know who Empress is?
Nope.
Okay,
I have no
Empress.
idea who that
Okay,
is.
Empress is on panel sometimes. For some people in chat, Empress was on the hippy dippy dating show with me. Yeah, so Empress was on the hippy dippy dating show, and Empress is quite white passing. I guess the only thing that seems to be non-white passing would be the hair. Her hair is in an afro, but skin tone, facial features wise, um, they are quite white passing. But they are able to be on the all black everything panel. Um, and I suppose that's because ancestry wise, their family's black. So, and I don't question like why are you able to be here. Um, but I do wonder as to why is there more merit in somebody being quite white passing on a all black panel, as opposed to somebody such as myself who
I knew
is
it. This was
almost
about
as
you.
it's always about me. I'm kidding. No.
No, okay, but you can have that. I mean, you're allowed to be upset by it.
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
think there's anything wrong
No,
with
no,
it.
no. Trust me. When it comes to anything in the entire world, never mad. I just have questions. Um, but yeah, like I guess when it comes to genetics, the thing that's everybody's favorite thing to talk about. When it comes to genetics, I am um almost more white, like, not more white, I'm basically equal percentages white and black genetically, but they would never ask me, hey Kat, do you want to be on an all white panel now? What is that?
You can pull up if you want. I don't mind if you pull up like Discord on like stream. That way, like people can see like because I don't mind staying on camera. That way, you have something other than just you on the stream.
Maybe I just want
I'll
people
just
to stare at
quickly
me.
make
You
my
ever
bed
think that
quickly.
maybe I'm just a giant narcissist?
I mean, I don't think that makes you narcissist.
But what if I want to be a narcissist?
uh, I personally think in most cases in real life that you're much more likely to be considered a POC if you're not white than you are like the if your skin counts like even remotely dark, people will treat you like a POC, including white people. So I think it's a bit easier, but if you look white if you look white enough, people like just kind of won't believe you. Like if you say you're a POC, it doesn't matter if you're actually a POC versus like if you're a POC that said if you have like darker skin and say you're white, like you're Italian or something, right? People won't. People will still treat you like negatively as in a negative way as a POC, but so it's just like a weird. It's just really weird like interaction that goes on with color that doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of like, okay, so in the example that I'm laying out, it works like that way, but also let's say for um I guess for any obviously the street would treat you like a different type of person. If it's all about the visuals. So when I was living in Haiti, I would meet quite a bit of different types of people because people were coming by to adopt children. So there was one couple where the husband was a Caribbean black man that was about the same complexion as mine, and the wife was a blonde woman. So they had one child that looked mixed and one child that actually just came out blonde. And I believe that at least within Prime's framework, that he would allow the blonde child to come on an all black everything panel because he would just say, "Well, my dad is black, and I've been raised by a black person." But the daughter would not be able to be on an all white panel, and why is that?
It's you're either all white or you're not white. That's how people treat it basically.
Also,
Well,
you're all white or
the
not white.
Well, the
Hmm.
thing about it is that I know this is like a very maybe more American centric kind of view of things, but take it to like the South African context, I guess technically, if you had mixed parents, for example, in South Africa, you'd be classed as colored or, like colored individual. Like literally, because there's three categorizations in South Africa: you're white, black, or colored. And colored's usually mixed or Indian or some kind of like ethnicity. So I can easily see you, Katarana, fit into that categorization, that societal categorization. Whereas I
Okay.
would, of course, fit in the white categorization, and someone who's much more of darker complexion or have much more, like you could say, indigenous blood to the native land would be fit into the black categorization. But in Australia, for example, it's usually kind of we have our own categories, like for example, if you're from the Torres Strait Islands or you're an indigenous individual, for example, you're going to put that as your categorization, whereas you can put it either white or some like other or something like that. It's usually I've never seen kind of like a black per se, like kind of like American import of race into Australia yet, at least.
Okay. So let's say is there a distinction in South Africa between colored and black?
Well, yeah, it used to be. There used to be kind of like a distinction made by the government, by the way, because all this stuff at the end of the day is just politicized stuff that to sort of like divide different categories of people and try and manage them that way. But in South Africa, yeah, that used to be like there would be a distinction between someone who's a colored individual. So if you're like Indian or have mixed of mixed parents, of course, like if you have a black parent or a white parent, or you just like appear more like light skinned in terms of your complexion, but you have like a mixed background, then yeah, you'll be classed as quote unquote colored. So, for example, you or something like that may be classed as colored instead of black, and you would have a different set of parameters. I don't know how it is today, but that was like it's all kind of old political kind of categorizations. Keep that in mind.
Okay. Quick question. Fluff, since you are one of the people that are able to like hop in and out between the channels, could you check the stream room and see if MVG is not gonna come onto the stream and just start screaming the N-word? Because that's always fun.
Yeah.
So can you just he'll figure it out. It's happened before. Yeah, it happens sometimes where people come in and they're just like, you fucking, and I'm like, wow, that's nice. That's really, really nice.
Yeah, yikes.
Yeah. Um yeah. So I guess hold on. Can I send
Yeah,
you
so I mean, sorry if I. So
uh
for me, for
really
example,
quick,
these racial categorizations that. Oh, sorry.
Alphen, if you're having an issue with your audio, just go and check your voice in audio settings. Because it might just be a problem with your voice and audio, but you're not server muted or anything. Also, at Mad Latin, I'm actually at Dylan's house right now. Not I'm not at Leftist Owl's house. Okay. Sorry about that, Viper.
No, it's okay. I just want to quickly say that on the panel, it seemed like it's a very America kind of, and I know there was one Euro who was talking who kind of like shared some of the same thoughts that I would have, but like in America, it seems that you have like the categorizations like black and white, and you speak in that kind of context, whereas especially when it comes to like South Africa or even Europe, I've seen it's more like, okay, there's ethnic divides and class divides and so on. I mean, even in South Africa, for example, yes, technically as me as a, you could say, English speaking white person, I would be classed as part of the white minority population, but there would be a difference between, say, for instance, me and Afrikaner, who have a much more sense of like kind of like a cultural and historical attachment to their ancestry than someone British and French ancestry, for example. And in Australia now, for example, for me, I would also have a different, I'm still classed as like a white person in Australia, because the thing about here in Australia, everyone, like the majority of people, are white here. In South Africa, the minority is the white people, essentially. But even then, there would be like differences between like Afrikaner and English, and that's why it makes it a bit complicated, if I put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Um. Okay.
You
So. Oh.
give me a on stuff. Nothing
Pardon?
seemed out of the ordinary.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'll
Please
move
don't
them.
blame me if you ended up like tricking me or something.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'm always just. I'm always like a bit like antsy because I'm like, oh, there's only so many slurs I can handle. Just kidding. I actually don't care, but it's more for Twitch viewers. So.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, for anybody else that wants to hop in, you actually have to hop into a call channel. If you're just like hanging out inside of like a text channel, I can't move you. But if you're inside of a call channel, I can move. Okay, cool. So I don't know. What does it mean for the rest of you? What does it mean to be white exactly?
I'll go, I guess. Whiteness has always been something that was just forced upon me that I never ever wanted, but people were just insisted because of the way my skin tone that that's what I should be, even though I've never identified as white. And I kind of just ended up giving up at some point because everyone just called me white so often. I just was like, whatever, man. And so like I've had kind of whiteness just thrusted upon me and demanded that I be white by mostly POC people, ironically.
I
I'm
so I
race fluid.
so I am trying to figure out more on that one. Um, does I guess your upbringing partially dictates like your culture, right? But also a big component of what makes you a big component of what makes you who you are is how like you go about existing in society, how people treat you. So if somebody were to you know tr- treat you not like a person of color, though you are culturally a person of color, does that somehow tamper with how much of a person of a color you are, like that you've been
Well,
raised as?
Well, I grew up. I visited the Dominican Republic a dozen plus times. My dad speaks Spanish as his first language, and he's an immigrant. And I grew up being called racial slurs on the daily for being Hispanic. I got beat up plenty of times. I got discriminated by teachers, so I had the full racism experience up until adulthood. And so when I came to New York City and suddenly everyone was like, you're too white to be Hispanic," it was pretty fucking awful and terrible to have my identity that I had suffered for having just get thrusted away from me.
Okay, so I guess you still uh get the typical POC experience, but yet some people are oh, wait.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's Dylan making a bunch of noise. Give me a sec. I'm just making sure he's like not dying or like spilling food on himself.
Bro, I think she's stolen.
I genuinely believe she's checking on Dylan. She seems to like be very careful about him.
Can you guys hear me? Am I in?
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yo, why are you talking weird?
Me?
About to be ready to have everybody hear your opinion about whiteness, but like in a big crowd. So like 300 people are going to be coming our way in a second. But yeah, anybody that wants to hop inside the server, feel free to. So sorry about that. Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit mixed at the moment what you say, like what it means to be white, because what you're saying is like what it means to be white is partially dictated by how you've been treated. But is that like what it means to be white holistically? Like, is that what it is to be white for everybody, no matter what? Oh shit! Actually, 1 second. I have to just my headphones died. That's why I couldn't hear you guys when I walked over. Let me just put in the other one. Sorry about that. I have way too many devices, and it's going to. Okay. Just give me like 3 seconds. I just quickly changed audio for everybody. Also, for anyone that just joined, welcome. You are now listening to our aftermath analysis of what this panel was that you were just on. Has it? Probably because I just got like 8,000 people. Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah, sorry. It was because I was just changing audio output a bunch of times. Um, really quickly, I'm just changing. Yes, welcome, Dylan's chat. If anybody else would like to come in and talk to us about what does it mean to be white, that would be great. Because I am absolutely so confused as to why Are others able to be on an all white everything panel and not myself? Is this a meme question? No, this is not a meme question. I am serious. Okay. So now everybody can hear you. So you guys can introduce yourselves if you would like. But yeah, we didn't end up doing the Craigslist story because we didn't make level 5, but we got close. But we didn't make level 5 exactly.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Fluff. I stream and bother Katarana and DMs every day.
Yeah,
good
that's fair.
introduction.
I listen. I actually answer all of my DMs because I'm still a small creator, so I still have enough time in my day to actually like
I'm
have
joking,
back and
I
forth
really
with
suck
people
though.
all day. Yeah.
Colorado, when you make it big, don't forget about me.
Don't worry, I'm never making it big. But I don't know.
It's not surprising.
So I guess for chat and for anybody else, at what point does somebody like become white? Is it all about like whether or not somebody that sees you walking by would assume that you're white? Are you white when like your like DNA says that you are now over 50% white? What exactly?
Well, the
I-
unfortunate thing about race is the fact that it's not something that you can necessarily identify as. It's more so something that is put upon you by the hegemonic power. So a lot of people will say, you know, if you're white passing, you're white, and that can seem dismissive of people that come from like ethnic backgrounds that may just be lighter skinned. But that's unfortunately the reality in under which they exist. They are, you know, if they're white passing, then they're considered white because of the hegemonic power, or at least the hegemonic culture will consider them white. So it's a really weird um thing to talk about in terms of like when you're white.
But
Yeah,
what matters more to your whiteness? Is it the way that people perceive you or the way that you're raised? Like if I'm raised by two very light-skinned black people that have experienced systemic racism and grew up as black people, but because of the way that the Punnett square works, I look like a white person. Is it more important what the streets treat me as or like what I actually experience in my household?
I think
That's
I
like
think
double
it has a little bit to do with everything when it comes to social interactions and social sciences. Um, a lot of it is very subjective, of course, but obviously your first impression is going to be your physical characteristics, and it also depends on the setting that you're put in. So if you're going to be in a panel that what we would typically see as white characteristics, European, Eurocentric characteristics, they're going to see stuff like your hair, your skin tone, even though you can mostly identify similarly with them. There are just physical characteristics that are far from what the public perception is of whiteness, of what being white would be. Um, a good example would be, well, there's also your personal interactions as well, how you act, how you carry yourself with your surroundings. A good discussion I heard early on a different panel was an example of someone like Logic. Um, he's half and half, or Tiger Woods. Uh, he like Logic is a light skin mix, and you can't really make a hasty judge off of that. But it also has to do with like how he would interact with, I guess, the people around him. Like, let's say if he were to be all prim and proper, what you would see in usually the higher class structures, he can sometimes pass off as white passing, depending on his peers, how friendly he is with them, how I guess charitable he is to acting and socializing with them, or if he just went like, what you see in the cultures of like more lower class, I guess. um, when he raps, what people perceive to be lower class raps, and he carries himself like he would be on streets. Yeah, he wouldn't be accepted in the white, I guess, social circles. So it depends. America's I'm just speaking from an American perspective. It's very subjective, and it also has a lot to do with your interactions and the very complex histories of what would be considered white. Because over here, it was at the beginning, it was very Anglo-centric. And then it expanded to other European nations. So it's a very complex issue of what
Can I
whiteness is considered.
I'd like to respond to where you said where it's like about the complicated thing.
Yeah.
I'll speak to like personal experience, and it yeah, like whiteness as a thing is culturally complicated. Yeah, but I think the way people perceive you as white isn't as complicated as it might come across, and that like I got like the racism I dealt with was just because I told people I was Hispanic, and they're like, "Well, fuck you," and they didn't need
Yeah.
any like cultural context. They were just like, "Well, fuck you." You've indicated that you are different.
Now,
And
can I
then
ask you
and then when
what?
I come to once I yeah, sure, I'll have no problem. Just real quick.
Yeah.
But then when I go to New York, I suddenly well, you're white because your skin's not dark enough for us to consider you Hispanic. And so I think
well, it
to
just
agree
seems
with
like
what
it's
Al said
arbitrary,
is that it just
no?
really
Like,
just it is. Yeah, well, to agree with what Al said, it's something that's thrust upon you.
Yeah,
It is.
it's
I
not
agree.
something that you can necessarily identify as unless I think like Empress, she
that's
looks
exactly who
white.
I was.
But
That's exactly who I was
yeah,
talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
she looks white, but she she considers herself part of the black community because of how, her parents and stuff like that. And it's a very fine line. I think it's very complicated because race is something that's thrust upon you rather than something you identify as. So it's very hard to um concisely say like what makes a person white, um and when is it okay for someone to identify as black when they don't look black. It's very difficult to say. I would have to look more into like race theory about this type of shit, but I ultimately it's just something that's thrust upon people, so it's not necessarily like something that you can choose or like identify as. So it's very difficult to talk about it in this sort of nuanced way.
Yeah.
Um,
So can I ask you, Fluff? When you experienced the being ostracized and attacked, and basically when you told them that you were Hispanic, what was your surrounding like? Where did those people come from? What was the culture around there? Like, what part of town was
I
it?
prefer it to be sure, but I prefer the actions to be referred to as racism,
Yes, of
because
course, I agree.
I grew up in a town of 5,000 in rural Indiana.
Indiana. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I guess when it comes to yeah, like I said, it is very subjective, and it even depends on like your countries, because even Mexico has the same problem. What we consider white here in America, like originally Anglo English, later German, and then Italian. In Mexico, they have a mixed population between the natives and the colonized Spaniards, right? They struggle with the same thing where it's basically the lighter the skin, the more white you're considered, and it is kind of a sliding scale of subjectiveness. But they do still have kind of that Euro supremacist mentality as well, because the native indigenous people also experience racism and are subjected to attacks, much the same as minorities here.
And
I
like
would
another,
just.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
you finish, Fluff.
Yeah, just one sentence. Another good example is that being black doesn't even exist in Dominican Republic. If you call they've done surveys and none of like they even if no matter how African somebody is, they refuse to admit that they're black
Yeah,
or call
yeah.
themselves
So
African.
actually, what do you call it? Prime and I are trying to get together a panel specifically about that situation as well, because there are people out there that are, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, can be essentially they are African descent, and even when they move to America, if they're still treated like black people, they still qualify themselves as being black, and I just don't entirely understand that either. And I understand that perhaps it's part of I'm not sure if that's like a bit of an internalized racism situation, if it's a bit of a like this is just not a concept here. But the thing is if you move to a different country and you're being treated exactly like a certain group of people, does that not make you at least able to come and be a part of these spaces? If I am a Black Dominican person or an African Dominican person, if everybody thinks I'm Black, does that not just automatically mean that like I can check off the black table on the census because I'm being treated like a black person? When they put out the call for me, if I get in trouble with the police, they're going to say a black man. They're not going to say an African Dominican that kind of is confused, that doesn't really know, right?
It's not that they're confused. They're like denying it. It's that it's way more complicated than that in the Dominican Republic, because there's people that have Indian descent, the Spanish Jewish descent, Spanish, a lot of different ethnicities and races, like Caribbean, Taino. A lot of different ethnicity and races that all just got mixed in a blender, and most people can't trace their ancestry back, so they don't identify as African. Like, I'm Dominican, I don't identify. Like, I asked everyone in my family, I was like, "Yo, where are we from?" They're like, "One of us a really long time ago was Spanish. Good luck getting anything else." Because I might be light skinned, but my great grandma was completely like dark, like extremely dark. My uncles some of them are extremely dark skinned. Like, you just can't tell. It's just not worth the trouble in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's just I generally would like to have more of a conversation with people of Afro Latino origin, because I do want to figure out why are you not categorizing yourself into this group if this is what you're treated like within America. But I also had the other question, and Prime, I asked Prime to let this person on the panel. He said no because it defeats the purpose. But I do want to know, what do you guys think on this? Joe Lewis. So Joe Lewis is
I love him.
yeah, a lot of people do. So Joe Lewis, when it comes to voice, face, etc., is a black person. Everyone recognizes that, but he was raised by white people. His original name is not Joe, but he got a different name as a result of his adoption. He's been raised by white people, and especially when it comes to what does it mean to be white, I would expect that someone like Joe Lewis would have a even better, a more nuanced type of take on this, as a result of the fact that he can see very starkly what's the difference in the way that he's treated versus the way that the rest of his family was treated. So would you say that someone like Joe Lewis, considering that when it comes to culturally was raised in a white household, should be allowed on something like an all white everything panel?
I mean, this is where
So this is where I think there was like a flaw in what Prime was trying to do. I feel like all white everything as like a meme is like in concept it could be funny, but like it feels like something that just like some edgy fucking alt-writer would do in response to all black everything. It doesn't feel like an actual panel. Not only that, actual Jake pointed this out. That's like every panel on Twitch. Who the fuck cares? Like, it just it to me it was just like a fundamentally flawed idea, and
it just lacks substance.
Yeah, like, I get that it's a meme, but there's just nothing there. Like, what all white everything? That's literally every panel on Twitch. It's not funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it is.
can I just? I mean, to be totally honest, like when I heard kind of like play around with that idea, but I was a bit surprised it was actually a genuine thing, which is, I mean, it's interesting, like from my perspective as someone who essentially was born in South Africa that now lives in Australia. you taught at school, because I was born in an interesting period, like post-apartheid period under Nelson Mandela, essentially, where the education systems were like changing to try to get away from the idea of racialism, this idea like, of black, white, and colored. And I was taught at least that, to try adopt a post-racial view. That's to say, to try not look at the skin color. And as a white person in South Africa, sort of like English descent kind of white person in South Africa, you kind of like are a minority amongst the more like generalized black population, for example. But the thing about this, what's interesting is while the schools will tell you, they'll tell you to take this view at home, usually your parents, especially, like even my parents, still had racial animosity. So, like, for example, I still remember my father telling me essentially, like, you got to be careful where you go. You remember your skin color, remember their skin color over there because they will treat you differently, essentially. And that kind of like protective kind of thing going on. And to me, as someone who come to Australia where the majority of people are white here, it's like, it's a bit reflecting on it. I feel, for example, that the whole racialism is kind of stupid, but I'm not ignorant of the fact that, hey, I am a white person, for example, or hey, like these problems exist in the outer society, basically. I can't just pretend to be colorblind at the end of the day, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I gotta go. It was nice talking with you, Katarana.
Oh,
I'll talk to you later.
my pleasure. It's always nice to talk to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, I'll see you guys later.
Thanks. So, Viper.
Damn, did I scare away someone already?
Pardon?
I was just going to say, did I scare someone away already? Jesus.
Damn, right? I think
that was quick.
I heard your ass.
No, I'm just joking.
Cool. So now we're all back in hanging. Of course, if anybody else wants to give any of your takes, let me.
But I on that, I do think that going back to Joe, I think he would be an interesting perspective to have, basically an inside outside knowledge, especially given his, I would say, unique kind of upbringing. It's not, not unique in the sense that it doesn't happen, but it's very rare statistically compared to the rest of the population. Him being raised by a complete white family. Do you know what kind of what kind of class they would be considered, and like what kind of activities they do and stuff? Can you expand on that if you know anything about his upbringing?
Like what class did he grow up in? I typically I don't know if he was adopted from a different country, but typically people that adopt it's pretty expensive to adopt a child. So if it was from a different country, I know that like to adopt kids from Haiti, it was like 40,000 US per kid or something. So I expect that like either they're like well off or very religious. That's because typically the church will like put in a bunch of money so that you can adopt your child as well. So if it was international, if it's not international, then I'm not sure. But I know like right now, the way that they're like the music teacher, and yeah, that's what I know that they currently do. But I do think it would be interesting, even let's say if Prime doesn't put it together, to maybe get Joe Lewis on for like a conversation about like this topic, just because, yeah, even if he isn't treated in society as a white person, it still must have some form of impact to be raised by a household that is different than your own culture, or like than your own race. So thus, the juxtaposition in the way that his household, the way that his household must have treated him, or the way people in his home were treated, as opposed to himself, would be very interesting to hear about.
With like people with atypical mixed race backgrounds, like that had different experiences than typical. Joe, that's already 3. We only need like 3 more.
Oh yeah, I mean, Chinchilla said that he wanted to do an all mixed everything panel. So yeah, I mean that would be quite interesting.
That'd be actually fun.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing that. Just
Are
really
you
quickly to
are you
answer your
looking for
question.
like?
Oh, sorry. Really quickly, just to answer your question, chat. Ochichilis, I'm sorry. I will probably have to talk more in the future, but like, your profile picture is a bit inappropriate. So I'll need to actually vet you properly sometime, but I can't do it on the air. Because if I speak to you, I'm just afraid that there might be a problem, especially since you have a photo of. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, so continue.
Oh, I was like, Fluff was saying, atypical backgrounds. Are there any like other Asian American streamers that you might be able to get on there?
Yeah, I mean there are like there's Aiko, Senpai Chow.
That's right. Yeah, because if they're knowledgeable, because with how Asian Americans are perceived, they're kind of in their own little unique situation. Recently, um, Fox News was pushing that the Asian American stereotypes were kind of like the inconvenient truths of minorities, right? Um, and the Asian community is kind of a wide demographic. They range for anywhere from basically bottom of the barrel refugees, like my family was, and then you got all the way up to the top, like the Chinese elite immigrants that came, for uh, college and stuff, and then they're or very successful Chinese business owners already. So
I
I
have a
think
very
that would.
long page on that subject, like about American or Chinese immigration to U.S. and how like racist it's been.
Yeah, I think if you have someone who's knowledgeable, that would be a very good perspective to bring in, because I think the Asian American community is very misunderstood, and I think it would just be good to like lay it down on there as well for you guys, because not many people talk about Asian Americans, even though we've been recently spiked in attacks because COVID and everything.
Yeah, I mean, so that's also uh part of what I wanted to talk about even in prior as well, is because I happen to be excuse me, I'm also like I'm multiracial, so I present as black, but yet I also am Asian and Jewish as well. So I think
Man, you're the full
having.
bag.
Yeah, actually, so essentially, when I did my ancestry thingamabob, I basically everything except for Arab. Uh, but like, yeah, I'm like Ashkenazi and everything. So there have been times where I've been on the all black everything panel, and I've had people come into my chat saying, "Oh, like you guys are talking about all black issues, but you're not talking about Asian issues." And then I was like, well, I am Asian, so even if I'm not talking about Asian issues particularly, a lot of these issues that we're talking about are not necessarily racially coded and just talking about perspectives as a black person, but I'm also giving my perspectives as a multiracial black person, that including my perspective as an Asian person as well. And then they're like, well, fuck you for not being on an all Asian panel to talk about this. And I was like, okay.
Making it all
Yeah,
then like.
Yeah,
I
I
think that
mean,
type of filtering is very harmful. It's like when people start, throwing out other groups to compare like that, like what they were doing to you. That I hate that crap. That's so toxic.
yeah, I mean, I just kind of see it as like a couple people just trolling in chat, but I guess like some people
I mean, it is concern
forget.
trolling.
Pardon?
It is concern trolling, absolutely.
Yeah, but I also like just generally I see like there is a general issue in Twitch politics of underrepresentation with the whole idea of getting together this mixed panel, even if it's like a singular day thing. And typically I would throw this out to Prime, but considering what this is, it's like Prime's not white and he did an all white panel. But I still think that maybe we should have a moderator that does happen to be mixed as well. and getting somebody that is of mixed or just general Asian descent is going to be quite hard, considering just there is a representation issue on this platform. The biggest streamers on the platform, even in the political space, even as leftists, are still not marginalized people. Which I'm not a person that gets particularly upset about it, but it will be hard trying to find a good moderator that is a mixed person, unless I get Destiny, and Destiny's okay.
I think you have to have some cultural. You have to identify yourself somewhat culturally with something before you start going off about like how you are it. I feel like I get like otherwise we're just being pedantic because like everyone's a million everythings, right? I'm not talking at you. I'm talking about Destiny. Like I really like he like brings up Cuban stuff all the time, but like he doesn't. I don't think he even gives a shit about speaking Spanish, and he just kind of uses it. He doesn't seem to culturally identify with being Cuban at all. Like maybe I'm speaking for him, but like I feel like I'm Native American. Like I'm like an eighth Native American, which is a lot for given like there's not a lot left. Like my great grandma is full blooded.
Yeah, Destiny has a tendency to use labels as kind of identity shields, because he even said on one of his streams that he uses non-binary as kind of an armor from the left side of politics. So I wouldn't take his labels too seriously. I don't think he actually identifies with those groups sincerely.
Well, I don't really want to go through and like start chipping away at people and being like, but are you really black? Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, when I think of a mixed panel, I would want somebody that more closely, I guess, identifies with the composition of their mixedness than Destiny. Because even if you are, there have been people I've met, when I was younger, that I would say, oh, okay, like, oh, you said you're like mixed, like, where are your parents from? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, okay. Okay, then you don't really identify too heavily with anything, I'm guessing.
Like, how many moderators are there on this on the platform? Because I know that like there are a lot more debaters than moderators, and not every debater can moderate. So
so I can only think of
what does the list look like?
What about Binks?
It looks like a whole bunch of white guys and Prime. It's Binks, Prime, Hans, Dylan, James, and then there's also a trans mass person, Danabo, I guess Geek, a whole bunch of white guys. But I mean,
Danabo's not white.
Danabo's white passing. I'm kidding. No. I'm still. Oh no, we're going back in a circle. No.
Oh no, we did it. We messed up. We lost our way.
No, fuck.
We stepped in our own trap.
Oh no. But is Danabo even able to moderate things? Is he not white passing enough? Okay. No, I'm totally kidding.
But you have a good point, Catarina, talking about this entire thing in general. Like, why are we doing the all anything? Like, let's just be like, hey, let's talk about black topics, and if you want people that have more skin in the game,
I guess that comes with a bit of the whole conversation when it comes to safe spaces, right? There's certain components of a conversation that we have on an all black everything panel that we don't really need to break down into if it's all black everything. If I have a conversation talking, what's the topic that we've had in the past? I'm trying to think of
I'm not allowed on there.
Yeah. Stay that way. Stay mad. No, I'm kidding. I'm trying to think what there was. Okay. How important is having black how important is it to have father figures in the household for preventing crime? Oh, sorry, was I cut off there? Okay, sorry. How important is it to have men in the household, specifically a father figure in a household, for preventing crime? So, a lot of that comes from the whole conversation of people believing that a lot of people believe the only reason why black men are overrepresented in the criminal justice system is due to the lack of father figures, and thus, they do all these other things to get attention, or they just lose their way. So, there's certain components of the conversation that are just able to be unspoken when you have a group full of minorities there, because we already know about what the perception is about the whole idea of black men being fatherless, etc. But you see, in a non all black forum where we're speaking about things like crime, overrepresentation for black men to be in prison, etc. Those are components that we don't even need to explain when it's an all black panel. So I guess that's the utility of having it. It's a bit of a safe space, and being able to not say a lot of, and not having to add as much additional caveats as you would have to in a mixed panel.
Sure. I feel like maybe I'm not a good person to make that argument for, in that I've spent the last 7 years of my life in 99% POC, like black areas. I went to 2 very historical black colleges, and this is like statistics like that and stuff like that. Like I also lived like in the projects in the middle of South Bronx, and now I live in Harlem. And I've spent a very large amount of my time studying statistics like this and stuff like that, and advocating like for how these statistics are wrongly used against POC, because I've seen how I've been like seeing these, like how it affects people and stuff like that. So like I really care a lot about the subjects that I already know. I feel like I already know a lot of these things.
I think it's just another talking point to be weaponized, like Fluff said, basically. You can take any statistics and mischaracterize it and abuse it to make any one group of people look bad. Like, I think it's the same thing that happened with the gay community and AIDS. They let it run rampant, but they were twisting the narrative that it's a gay-only disease. Yeah, it's just really bad faith politics when it comes to that. The narrative, especially when they leave out important details as to like how the law affects certain communities, specifically that affects black people disproportionately, that to the point where a lot of the fathers would be in jail. And I don't necessarily agree that the father needs to be there. I feel like it's more of an economic issue. I don't want to get into it. I mean, that's besides the
But
point.
to be fair
Yeah.
to Katarina, is like if we like, let's talk about times where we got judged by a cop and had a really shitty experience. I'd be like, well, okay, I'm probably just gonna step out.
Okay,
And
but
I
that
get that too
but the
often.
whole thing is like even I myself that's I quite often have conversations with non-POC people, and I think some people do get a little bit confused. Not that it particularly bothers me about the whole idea of black people not being a monolith. Now, quite often that is a talking point that is specifically reserved for conservatives to say, well, like, I kind of do like the cops because black people aren't a monolith. But I do want it to be sometimes applied to people outside of the black sick, or how the fuck you say it, leaving the Democratic
Blexit.
Party. Yeah, Blacksit. I can't do it. Blexit. There we go. Blexit. I did it. Yeah, it's sometimes used by people in that sphere. But I would like the idea of black people not being a monolith to be applied outside of that sphere, specifically because it is quite accepted as a part of growing up as a black person that, your parents are going to give you a talk about how to deal with the cops, and you're going to inherently have a very bad experience with the cops. And how many times might you be harassed by a cop over the course of your life? And though, of course, it is anecdotal, I do believe in statistics and the fact that anecdotes can be applied across different populations. And I could say that I, as a black person, have never had a bad interaction with the cops. My brother has never had a bad interaction with the cops. My mother has never had a bad interaction with the cops.
To be fair, you're Canadian.
Yes, I am Canadian, but I did not grow up in Canada. I moved to Canada for university when I was 18. But
Oh,
my entire household mostly lived in Florida from
oh,
1999
okay, I'm sorry.
until 2012.
I was wrong.
Yeah. So, in that case, I would expect for us to have more run-ins that are negative with the cops, but I have never had a negative experience with the cops. Now, does that make me believe that the black people don't, on average, have a bad interaction with the cops? No, I do believe that is true, but I have not personally experienced it, and thus, when we have conversations, oh, sorry. Sorry, sometimes
You cut out again.
yeah, sorry, it's because I keep on shaking my foot, so I hit the camera.
I personally.
Yeah, so when I think about black people on average having this type of interaction, I know that if I were to be allowed on if I were on an all black everything panel and we were talking about our experience with the cops, I would not be able to actually relate to everybody else. And then that's where I start to think, well, maybe I can give though I just gave an argument for the utility of all black panels, it is also somewhat presumptive for me to assume that everybody in an all black everything panel will actually have some type of common experience, because this is a very integral experience to, I guess, the black experience in America, but yet is something that I and nobody around me has ever experienced. So are all black panels really that useful? Because now we're talking about something that we're just presuming that everybody in the room will have an opinion on or have a negative opinion on, yet I don't.
Well, I mean,
Nah.
you know the saying, you can compare notes, right? I mean, there's always room for exceptions.
Yes,
And I think that's a valuable discussion.
Yeah, so there is always room for exceptions, of course. But at the same time, considering that everybody within my circle as well that happens to be black has also not had a negative experience with the cops, that starts to give me more questions as to, is it that certain predominantly black areas are being over policed? Not that, and that necessarily is just any black person walking on the streets might have some type of negative interaction, because I have always lived in upper middle class areas, so thus I've never been I've never been much within the vicinity of cops for any type of oppression to occur.
That's because you didn't put yourself in that position.
But how does one put themselves in position to be potentially oppressed? I mean, because quite often I have
By
heard
doing something illegal.
Yeah,
But-
or just shady. Like, there's like this. Ultimately, I think the primary mediator of anyone's experience with the police is behavior. Not saying that your experience is a consequence of your behavior, but if you're not behaving in a way so that you interact with the police, you know, you can't have any experience.
That's just not
Is that-
factually true. That's literally
I mean-
statistically proven to not be true. Like, it doesn't matter how you act in a large majority of
I'm not
cases.
okay. This is.
Things.
I'm not talking about your behavior when you interact with them. I'm talking about like, like. All right.
we
I
just
didn't- I
finished
didn't
reacting.
phrase this correctly,
Hold on.
But
Argument?
I didn't.
We just finished reacting to the all white everything panel, so now we're talking about whiteness and blackness and stuff.
And do something bad to get in trouble with the police, then you would never
I'm
have
saying
done anything
if
with
you
the police
weren't
at
even
all.
in the vicinity of the police, like if you don't come into contact with them, so like, this is a really broad interpretation of behavior.
See,
But,
but I would still push back on that as well, because we've seen many different situations in which people have been doing basically nothing and still end up having interactions with the police that end up being negative. So when I went through and said my mother, my brother, and myself have never had interaction with the police, I left off my dad, and my dad has had different situations in which he was like driving into our neighborhood and they just assume, why are you driving into this neighborhood? And my dad's like, no, I live here. But they just assume that my dad is just coming to like stake out some type of a gated neighborhood. And my dad's like, no, I live here. Though it didn't turn violent and it wasn't as negative as many other people. have had, it's still a run-in with the police, which my dad could say as being negative. But I think that's part of some of the issues that being a black male might cause. But black women do also have issues with the cops. But for some reason, I think due to my mother not being black passing, people don't believe she's black. They usually think she's Indian. And then for myself, just being are you pulling me over? They leave us alone.
But I feel like Pog might be saying like if you're not in a like like a place where police are around more often, you're less likely to be arrested.
Yeah, this is all about like before you ever come into contact with them, or whether you or not you do is what like. It's
Like,
Well,
I
I-
kind of apply more of an intersectional.
Serene Kitty, thank you so much for the sub.
I see
All,
the
all the
experience as a
subs really,
compound
really
of, like,
matter,
the
and it really
intersection of
helps
all these
me
different
like
things, you know?
survive. So
And
thank
one
you.
of the big ones is going to be blackness, but it's not the only thing, you know?
Yeah, I wanted to add something else as well. It may also be you said you in that portion you were growing up in a upper middle class area, correct?
Yes, I've always grown up in upper middle class areas.
Okay. Yeah, so that drastically reduces the amount of interactions because there are
This is what I'm
obvious
trying to say.
hotspots of over policing, and where your location was, they didn't have that culture of over policing. So I think that drastically reduced your chances of having a negative
This is
interaction.
where the
Because
difference in your experience arises from, is what I'm trying to get at. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
it's
So then,
there's
I
a
guess,
lot of factors.
yeah. So then that's where.
Thank you for saving my phrasing of that, man.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That we reworded it.
Well, I guess it just it starts to get me more into the questions. So I've had conversations with what's his name, Tom Foolery podcast, and he was saying that he doesn't believe that race is the most important factor in what will cause you to have a negative interaction with the police. And I said I disagree because I believe that like a white male pulling into our neighborhood would not have been bothered, whereas my father was. But I do believe that, of course, like everything, it is intersectional. So my lack of run-ins with the police are very much based off of different types of socioeconomic circumstances. I've never lived in an area in which the police has had to come. Even in university, I always made sure I lived in decent areas. So either buildings in which police will not be called or areas in which police won't be called. So I have generally not had very many run-ins with the police overall. But I do believe that if I were living in an area that was socioeconomically disenfranchised, I would have more run-ins with the police as a black person as opposed to being a white person.
Yeah. So that would like then emphasize the black axis of, you know, your experience construction more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta hop off, guys.
Oh, well.
Can I have a funny story. Like I feel like this is the only time I'm going to be able to share this. So.
Oh, but I know Peter just left. But if you're still looking at stream, please, thank you for coming by. Okay. Bluff, take it away.
I was really close with my cousins as a child, and both of them are black, and so I grew up as a kid until I was like 12, faking I was part black. Like I absolutely thought, because we were really close, and like I saw them all the time. I had my aunt, and I never saw their uncle. And so I just thought that because I never bothered asking. Everybody's saying, so I genuinely thought like I was part black.
Just because of the situation?
Well, yeah. I mean, my cousins were always around me, and they're full, like they're very dark skinned.
Okay, this leads me to another question. And I do believe that we're all going to agree on it, but I also just want to talk maybe about the different reasons why we agree. So there are people out there that genuinely believe that they're part of a different race than they were born as. So those people would not be let on to an all black everything panel. But if let's say, I guess it was part of the tanning conversation that I was having on Stardust's panel this weekend. There was someone
The
that got like,
trans-racialism.
yeah, there was someone that was getting melanin injections, went to like Kenya, and it was like, well, a priest in Kenya said I am now officially black. Obviously, these people are searchable, so if they were to say, hey, can I be on an all black panel, Prime could look them up and say nah. But if they weren't as well known for their transracialism efforts, and you just saw them and you were like, well, this person looks a bit confusing, but I'm not going to say like, hey, you kind of look like you're supposed to be black. You can't really say like you're not black enough if there's no evidence that they're not. So I guess, for what justification would somebody have to say no to this person, if they're like confusingly like, you look black but there looks something wrong here, I'm a little bit confused.
This just shows how incredibly stupid race as a concept is.
Yeah, it's
just
essentially
so
basic.
absolutely dumb.
I think like we should be careful not to abstract things too much from like, obviously all black people are different and their experience is different. It's like they're not interpreting like some entity, the black experience. They each have different experiences, and like the sum total, we sort of abstract this idea of what is, anyway, I'm just trying to say, like, we should keep in mind that this is all ultimately individual experience.
Yeah.
Because that there isn't any actual like collective entity experiencing. I guess. God, fucking. Sorry. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, fine.
Yep. If I can do a little rant on trans, I feel like you
Sure.
want our opinion on trans. Stoic, you please. You go first.
Oh, okay, cool. To me, to be totally honest, if someone told me, for example, that hey, they're getting these melanin treatments to be a different like race, I'll kind of ask them what's the purpose for doing that in the first place, and like you say, well, I identify more as this particular race, and again, it's a bit like I agree with a lot of people saying it's like race in itself is kind of like a social construct, and it's kind of stupid in a sense, but again, like one has to kind of like ask like what necessarily is that person who does that doing it for? Are they doing it for themselves necessarily? And then how does like society respond to that? And that's something I don't know how to answer, so I'll let
I actually have a really it's actually what I wanted to talk about. Firstly, I think people don't do this to be racist or be like shit on like the race or something like that, right? It's very clearly like that's not their goal. I'll be frank, it's that we live in a society where if you're white, you can't. There's a limit to how into a culture you're allowed, another culture or thing that you're allowed to be. You're not allowed to be super into a culture, and so a lot of the time, these people feel like I can't get if I don't. The only way for me to get any more into this culture is if I look this way. Like I need to literally physically adapt myself to this because I'm not allowed to be any more a part of this culture. You see the dude that was trying to be Korean, he's like, I'm not allowed to be, I can only be so a part of this culture until I look this way. And it happens a lot with like black. It's like how often will you make like a big deal out of like white people like getting all into black culture, like they're getting like we have like derogatory names for them. We call them weird or like we look at them weird. Like you're not allowed in society like to be white and like be really really into a different culture. Everyone like makes a weird deal out of it.
Well, isn't the issue sort of more that like they're trying to adopt an identity to some extent, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is like, but like if I happen to just be listening to like Method Man I generally just listen to one artist at a time, then I'm like, nobody is upset by that. As far as I know, again, I think we're sort of abstracting something that isn't
is it okay to want to change your cultural identity?
Well, yeah, that's the
Oh man,
question.
that does give
Yeah, it's a bit
yeah, it's a
difficult.
bit
I
tricky,
mean,
right? Because yeah, I guess there have uh, I don't know. I guess
Like if I move to Africa, and I live there long enough and I start identifying with the culture of like the place I live and embrace, like am I allowed to
I
identify culturally as
Well,
African
can I
anymore?
just quickly answer that before Catarana goes? The thing
yeah,
about
you
it is that I
probably
have,
have good you
yeah,
probably have good takes on
yeah.
it.
Technically, for example, I've had generations of my ancestors that have actually grown up, lived, and died in South Africa, essentially. Now, by that metric, you could say I am quote unquote South African. But then, if I, for example, try to say I'm African, people more associate that with like indigenous or, of a certain phenotype of, like a
Pretty
certain,
racist.
like essentially. So, like, for me, it's one of those things where essentially, like I won't be classed as African by some Pan Africans, for example, because I'm white. At the end of the day, I've got European ancestry. I was a colonizer who came outside of South Africa, even though I may have like hundreds of years. Like sometimes I've lived longer than some Pan Africans have even touched Africa, for example. So I mean, this is what it's like. It goes into those gray zones, and when it comes to that, I don't know exactly. Even from a governmental standpoint, I think going towards things like, as I mentioned before, like post-racialism and all that kind of stuff. It's utopic in theory, but like from a governmental point of view, it makes legislating a bit easier because the moment you start to like do more and more racial divides and more like you get into these like nitty-gritty problems, and it's like I'm just thinking from like a governmental standpoint how to approach it essentially, if that makes sense.
yeah, because these concepts are just like they're not very good. They don't really reflect any reality. So then when you try to apply them to the world, like the more you try to do it, the harder, the more problems you find, and like the more you notice that it doesn't really correspond to anything. I think.
Yeah, I do want to kind of give a bit of my standpoint. At least I don't believe you can change your race. Race is a social construct, and even if it's partially like a way that you're treated. So if people when they see you are still treating you like another race, you cannot just say that you are a. I guess it gets a little bit sticky,
But
but
what
really quick.
about
Oh, really
for the
quickly.
long time that Rachel? Okay,
Stoic, do you count yourself as being a South African or Australian if somebody asks you?
That's the tricky question because I'm in the interesting divide where, like, technically, in about probably about 8 days is my birthday. I turned 25, and technically, I would have now lived longer in Australia than I did in South Africa because I left South Africa when I was 12. But the thing about it is that I cannot, for example, identify necessarily as South African per se, because if I were to go to South Africa and if I talk to like some of my South African friends in South Africa, I sound like an Aussie essentially. But yet, if I'm over here and I talk, like people knows I have an accent, so I'm like, "Oh, you're from South Africa." So I'm in this interesting like, third culture kind of individual where I don't know which I'm more identified. Like whenever I've been asked that question before, Katarana, and all I say essentially is I'm like just South African Australian. Like that's what I said because I can't answer the question what I more identify as. I mean, my citizenship says I'm Australian. Like I'm protected by the Australian government. If shit had to happen to me, the Australian government is likely to sort of get my ass essentially. But that doesn't really answer your root kind of question. So that's why I'm a bit like I don't know exactly how to answer that.
Okay,
So.
yeah, no, it's just somebody in chat was wondering.
so
No worries.
to ask you a question, Katarana, is well, when before people knew Rachel Dolezal was actually white, she was treated as black for a very long time. So does she? That means she's black?
Yeah, this is such a hard thing to think about. Like it just gets so weird at the edges because yeah, it's not.
I guess
Definition isn't.
I would probably have to think more about it because I'm not one for just giving like, off the cusp, really quick, like, answers that
Okay.
like
It's more of
later.
a discussion
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I guess I'll ponder on it and probably like release a statement or something, thinking about that.
Official statement.
Yeah, an official statement. I'll sign it and everything. Um,
Also, Stoic, about that thing you said about the colonizer. Uh, yeah, it's important to remember because something like South Africa, right? It's pretty fucking evident. But there is not. We can play this game like, and I'll play it with anybody. I guarantee if we look hard enough, any culture you call out has done some form of colonizing, even in Africa,
Exactly,
which
yeah.
I hate when
Yeah, that's
racist, like you talk about how people love to think of like Africans as like these indigenous like people in the safari, even though like Ghana and Kenya have like these pretty big cities, and like they just don't.
Heating up
They're
pizza?
just so weird about it,
Okay.
about like
Are
what
you-
an African is.
or
Like,
is it for
but
me
a
too?
lot of cultures have colonized. What?
Dylan, we want to know your feelings on the question. At what point can you consider somebody to be white? Like, would Joe Lewis, should he be allowed on an all-white everything panel?
Yes, I did have many issues with my mother, and I will talk about that in detail. Yes, I had many motherly. Yes.
That's exactly what I
Yes.
said.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I wish my mom took me to the ice cream shop more. I wish
Mhm.
my mom would, take me out to get many creams. The ice cream shop.
Okay, is that what it means to be white to you?
Yes, that's what it
Is
means to be
having
white.
mother issues?
Yes. That's what
Okay,
it is.
that's cute.
Great.
When you're done with the pizza, do you want to I probably want to end by one. Do you want to come and give your final thoughts, and then we can go watch The Boys?
Sure. Oh, and Stoic Viper, man, dude, that fucking Jackson Hinkle, that rabbit hole I jumped down with that award, of the amount of fucking weird stuff that award. The dude who is in charge of the association that funds the award is a 9/11 truther. And the award
Yeah,
is
it's
named
crazy.
after somebody who worked for Press TV, which is the Iranian state fucking sponsored, not even state sponsored, state controlled news outlet, which pushes Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism on the daily. Not to mention, like, they give thousands upon thousands of dollars to people who just push pro-Assad talking about. That shit is wild.
You know that you can technically now say that Jackson is actually being like funded by Assadis because it's a Assadis front group.
No,
They
he's
give
being
him money
100%
essentially with that
funded
award.
by pro-Assad lobby
Yeah.
groups, basically. That's what happens.
Yeah, there we go.
Because they don't like tell people like how they choose their process, but the award comes with a cash prize, and it's just so
Yeah,
blatant,
so you
like,
can
how
say
they
you've
get
been
into it.
funded by the Assad regime.
Oh my god! Is there any evidence that that group is actually from the Assad regime or just Assad support?
Well, if you ask, I think Conspiracy BS will have more on this because I actually learned a lot about it from him. He's more in tune with that. So I would say send him a DM. I'll go look at it a bit later, but I remember sort of like getting that from like Conspiracy BS. So I'll say go for him, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. You guys have
No worries,
a
man.
good rest of the stream.
No, you're gonna
What?
you're
Awesome.
gonna be back.
No,
for-
I'm gonna go eat pizza.
Just let me just.
He's
pause
gonna be
this, just
free.
gonna
You're
pause.
attached to this chair,
I would
and
just,
I'm
like-
still walking away to eat my pizza. That's crazy.
I mean, you'll be back at one.
crazy.
Okay. Let me know
Pause.
who you
I
want
just
me to
want
rate
everyone
eventually.
in chat to be aware that this is probably the most calm, rational, and not entertainment whoring discussion about this stuff that you'll ever encounter. Show your appreciation. Subscribe to Cataract.
Well, it's also
Yeah,
because
give her
I-
that money, people.
Yeah, give me no. Okay, no, but it's also
Support our
I'm
wandering
just
scholar.
I'm generally just a very calm person. So even even if we're talking about like the most like crazy stuff, like when Prime is Legendary was like, we don't want you anymore, I was like, okay. Like I don't get you can't date non-black people, okay. Like I just generally pretty chill, but yeah. I do really quickly want to say though, when we're talking about transracialism, I do want to quickly like talk a little bit about transculturalism because culture is different than race. I quite often tried to make sure people, when they're saying black culture, are being a bit more nuanced with the word black culture because there's a lot of sex in black culture. There's not just, we think about African American culture, but I also want people to consider Caribbean culture, African culture, European black culture, etc. when they think about black culture within the States, because there are people that live in America that have not been here since the 1700s. There are some of us that got here in the 60s, and our culture is very different. So I believe that there is an ability for something such as transculturalism to exist. Once again, of course, through anecdotal evidence, because I am not a sociologist or an anthropologist. I'm a physicist.
Good
So
news. I was a class away from a bachelor's in anthropology. I decided not to do it because I wanted to hurry up and graduate and get my bachelor's in psychology. So, my opinion on this is, because I actually focus solely on cultural issues, cultural anthropology. My opinion on this is, the idea of a black culture is pretty fucking dumb. The idea of an entirely Afro-American culture is pretty fucking dumb. If you've ever been more than 2 places in your life with black people, you'll know the cultures are pretty different. Like, I hate the idea of like a racially or ethnically singular culture, especially in America, which people love to do. People like America is just all one culture. No, if you even the boroughs in New York City differ wildly in culture, by depending on the area you go to. Atlanta does not have the same African American culture as New York City. They are very different. And I hate when people try to, not you, Katarana, but I hate when people try to go, it's all big, it's all just one thing. It's so anthropologically stupid. There's all the things that you consider different about a culture, they are different.
Yeah, but I also just wanted to say that so when I was saying that I have my anecdotal, I want to give an anecdote, of course. My quick anecdote for this is going to be my experience with identifying as a Haitian person. So growing up, I did not. I did not consider myself to be Haitian. I consider myself to be strictly Jamaican, as a result of the fact that I didn't speak Creole at all. I very rarely interacted with my father's family, and my mother does not like Haitians very much, even though she's married to one. So we never
Do you speak
participated. I do understand it. You don't want to hear me speak any language that isn't English, because it basically just sounds like me speaking in English, just butchering a language. So I speak Spanish, but it sounds like shit, and I speak French, but it sounds like shit, and I speak Creole, but it sounds like shit. But so it wasn't until I was 15 that I started identifying as a Haitian person. But I very, very strictly would correct people up until I was 15 and say, no, I'm not Haitian. I would even lie and say I was Dominican. Growing up in Florida, being Haitian was not something cute to be. So I tried to distinguish myself away from being part of that group. And yeah, my mom just very much did not like Haitians very much. So it wasn't until I lived in Haiti when I was 15 that I was like, yes, actually, I am a Haitian person. And now I mostly identify as a Haitian person when it comes to am I Jamaican or Haitian. And it was always something that I was technically Haitian, but it wasn't something I culturally identified as. Due to living in the country, being basically submerged in the culture for 3 years, because while I was living in Haiti, I was not allowed to leave ever. So I didn't leave ever. I became quite acclimated with Haitian culture, and thus was able to say, yes, okay, this is something I understand. And I can actually talk to people about Haitian politics, culture, food, dressing, etc., history, da 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 da. So yeah, I think transculturalism is possible because we go in and out of what do we identify as most.
Why did it even need to be transculturalism? Why can't it just be being multicultural?
No,
Yeah.
you can be multicultural, but I was not specifically identifying as a Haitian person. I can identify as a Haitian and Indian and Chinese person, but I wasn't. I was only identifying as a Jamaican Chinese person.
Yeah, this is different because you stopped being the previous identity. Right? So, or you stopped not being, but stop assuming.
I
that
mean,
make sense?
I'm always a Jamaican person. Just I've been so removed from the Jamaican part of my. Yeah.
Can we apply the three? We're talking about trans identity, and they use a 3-pillar idea of it a lot of times, of internal, your internal concept of yourself, your experience, and the expectations placed on you by society. And I feel like this is useful beyond that, because we run into issues with like confusing different parts of identity and stuff. Does that seem like a valuable like tool for this discussion, or?
I feel like we can make a joke that she could be considered Schrodinger's cat. Yeah, she could be
Oh my god.
whatever.
Are people making
depending on who
Schrodinger
asks.
jokes to a physicist? Oh
Dude, I know.
no.
Yeah, it's that meme is so misleading.
Yeah,
But-
when people say
Depends on
Schrodinger's
who you
things,
ask.
I'm just like, you're not even using the principle properly.
You get it, Peter. I got that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean-
but I think like so. Here's a little bit about my white identity. When I'm in northern Minnesota, and the primary like racial binary here is not white and black; it's white and native. There's 3 reservations in the county, my county. Like it's all so like yeah, like my construction of that identity didn't. In fact, I mean, I think the only black person I knew was like my buddy at daycare, and he was, I don't think I really that like part of it hadn't. Later on, when I moved like down to the cities and stuff, things were different. But so obviously, I do have that the white black kind of the part of whiteness that's constructed in opposition to blackness. So it doesn't always like there's multiple aspects of it combining in generally all cases, although for a lot of people there's like one super primary one, but then also regarding like trans or multiracialism, like there's a huge population like of that's how like honestly it might be the majority of like native people are some sort of like distance between like the cultures of the reservation and like it's interesting. Because a lot, that community has just been so devastated. Like, it doesn't have a whole lot of cohesion. So, yeah, they're all experiencing different like, well, and there's just a lot of multi-racial people, and this is a context that did not, or have like the just one drop thing involved. So they're more like
I feel like the
Just-
point you're making is shit's pretty complicated where you're from.
yeah, it's like anyway, yeah. I just thought like that might have shed a little light on
I
something.
thought it was interesting.
So we're talking about like aspects of like the possibility of being like transracial or like aspects of being transculture, right?
Yeah.
One second,
mean-
actually. Neo Gaia, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yo, Fluff, you're definitely gonna be the moderator for this all multiracial panel. What the fuck?
Ready? Hello, everybody. I'm Neo Guy. Yeah, I just wanted to add. So I know you guys have gone over several things, but I just wanted to add, like in the U.S., how fascinating it is how neighborhoods are racialized. So I'm from LA, and I'm from South Central LA, and so I have heard. You cannot imagine all the crazy stuff people have told me what they thought South Central is like from people who are not from there. But the thing that's interesting to me about the reason why I bring it up is like, okay, fun fact: the LA riots, right? However the media portrayed them, obviously involved police brutality and anger about that, right? But it was definitely portrayed in a very like, this is a black people thing, basically. I mean, I was like a little kid when that happened in South Central, but just obviously since then I've read what the media said that time. But fun fact, like I learned this in a book by Mike Davis, who wrote a couple books about LA. 51% of the people arrested in the LA riots were Latino, because at that time it was like 45% Latino in South Central. Now it's like a majority. It's since like the late 90s. It's been a majority of Latinos there. But so it's interesting. So even though I grew up in South Central, my mom has been in South Central since she was a child. Like, I can't tell you how many people did not believe that I was from South Central because I wasn't black, because they were like, oh, South Central's black people. And it just happened a lot. And even now, it's been like half Latino basically for 30 years. Or even more than half, but at least half like Latino for 30 years. And just all the time, people are like, oh, isn't that a black neighborhood? And I'm like, it was, but like, there's still a lot of black people, don't get me wrong, like probably like 40% in general, but it's just fascinating how that's been coded. Whereas like South Central actually, I think until the 30s, it was a white neighborhood. So it was a white neighborhood. It was a black neighborhood from like starting in the 40s a little bit to like then until 1990 basically. But now it's just been like, oh, it was a black ghetto for a while. So people are like, oh, it's still a black ghetto, right? And it's like, no, it's just the ghetto, but it's a multiracial ghetto now, a black and Latino ghetto. That's just fascinating to me. Like, also other places that people think of still like fairly associated with black culture, or like Compton, Watts are also majority Latino. So it's just fascinating to hear all the crazy stuff people say about South Central, and it's like, and their associations of what they think black poor people are like, and it's like, the neighborhood's not like what you think it is, and also like, wow, like it's been interesting. It's been an interesting ride to hear all that crazy stuff.
Subtle racism.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, and like it's fascinating to me. But just like, yeah, it's, what do I want to say? Oh yeah, even Compton was also like, actually Compton was like a white neighborhood until like the 50s, I want to say. I gotta look that up, but like it was, and then it became, when black people started moving in because of redlining, they were like, okay, they left basically. But so like Kevin Costner was from Compton originally, like the famous actor. So like, I don't know, it's just interesting. I just wanted to bring that up. So it's just interesting how coded, like once something becomes coded, like a neighborhood as black, if it's a poor neighborhood, people just assume forever that it's that way. And it's like, has no one stepped in this part? Like South Central has almost like about 900,000 people in South LA. So it's just fascinating.
Well, and those people could
How
go
many
there,
people,
and
and
they
even people
still
who you think would
probably
know
see
better
it
do
that
not.
way.
It's fascinating.
Because
yeah, they probably
their
would.
experience of it would be like, they would expect it to be, you know, like they would think of it as being black before they even got there, you know? So like, yeah, it's just a ridiculously.
Or I have an interesting opposite example of I went to college in a neighborhood that's majority white, but it actually was historically black. But it became a rich white neighborhood. So all the history that it was black neighborhood was like forgotten. I remember, and someone wrote a book that was like, actually, this used to be black neighborhood for like 80, 100 years, and you're like, what? Like, because this neighborhood is rich now, all associations with blackness have been like erased in the minds of people in this city, and you're like, wow.